then that it actually started sort of getting the attention that it deserved, and that was really the beginning of a restoration program for Tower Hill. So, I mean, if you look around here, basically every single plant you see here has been hand planted. So, with school children and volunteers and field and game, everything was put back, and the focus was very much about breeding game birds and restoring this natural environment. And has anyone here been into the gallery, the Warrnambool Art Gallery? If you've got time, it's well worth a visit. The original Eugene von Gerard's painting of Tower Hill is there, and not only is it quite an amazing painting just to go and look at, but it has a lot of significance to Tower Hill now. The tree species that were selected back in the 60s and 70s and 80s were basically all identified off the painting. So it was quite forward thinking back then to actually consider going back to what was here originally, and to put that back. In the 60s and the 70s, most people were planting big monocultures of pines and mahogany gum and spotted gum. So to actually think about
what was there originally?
Yeah, putting back what was there originally was actually quite a step forward. There were a couple of mistakes made, but on the whole they did a pretty good job, really. Yeah. And I guess as part of that restoration program, there were also the reintroduction of a number of animals. So it wasn't just putting back plants, but trying to put back animals. So here at Tower Hill today, people can come and visit and see animals like emus, kangaroos, echidnas, which would always, I think, have been here. They wouldn't have been reintroduced, but certainly other creatures like possums and sugar gliders were. I understand that Tower Hill's gone from quite a dynamic landscape with eruptions and volcanoes and ash that went all the way to Warrnambool, and so you can imagine it would have been quite a place of change way back then, and it's been a continuing, evolving place of change. So now we've even gone past that. It's still a state game reserve, but the hunting emphasis is no longer there, and so now Tower Hill is really a place for recreation and for community education. So a bit like you guys are here today, a place to learn, and a place to perhaps not experiment's probably not the right word, but a place for research. So it's not a pristine wilderness, and it never will be, but it's a really interesting place to learn about the natural environment and to get an understanding of what happens. So it's significant for its geology. It's actually listed on the national and the state registers, heritage registers, so it's actually been recognised for that. And it's also a wildlife haven. I mean, if you look around the area, it's either there's Koroit north, there's farmland and residential areas all around it. So it is what we would call an island for wildlife, and a real green open space for people.
It's a very specific if you see as well. You might have mentioned Cindercone woodland. You only get it here and
That's
at Mount
right.
Eccles. Mount Eccles is probably a good reference site. This is a highly modified trash site that's sort of trying to struggle in a sea of agricultural, industrial landscape.
That's right. So that's great. And there's very little Cindercone woodland left, and we often grapple with how you rate its condition, because it all has been hand planted. So it's quite a tricky one. So I guess in considering all of that, so if you sort of digest all that information and think, wow, there's been a lot of change, and that change flows on to how we manage the park now. So it impacts the vegetation management issues. So the fact that it will never ever be a self-sustaining environment. It will never be able to manage itself. So if you think about other remnant patches of bush that one of the management tools you might use to go in and burn it, which will help its regeneration. You just couldn't put a match in Tower Hill and walk away and expect it to look after itself. There are enormous issues with the weed seed bank in it, so we're constantly struggling with weed issues at Tower Hill. That's one of the biggest sort of natural problems we have. The soil types at Tower Hill are extremely fertile, so it does promote weed growth. And so then, in order to keep sustaining the restoration approach that we have here, then we have other issues with grazing animals. So you might think naturally of rabbits are a problem, which is correct, and they're one of our introduced grazers. But then also we have other grazing animals, other grazing pressures from kangaroos and from koalas even. So koalas, that's another animal that was reintroduced into the park. So and that you can't treat anyone in isolation. They're all kind of interrelated. You have to kind of manage them all at the same time. You have to do your weed work to put plants back in the ground, but you also have to do your rabbit work so that the new trees don't get eaten. And so there's a whole raft of
issues. You've got to control koalas so that they don't kill eucalypts and open up canopy, increasing light to the ground, which only encourages weed germination at the expense of other, and then softer vegetation underneath that you can't burn, so therefore you don't have any of the indigenous species able to regenerate. It's kind of a chicken and egg scenario.
Yeah, it's really quite tricky. Another overlay over all that is that you look at, from our perspective, we have 5 staff that work in the area. So there's 5 of us that manage an area from basically the western end of Peterborough right through to Port Fairy, and so there's 2 kind of major areas of park to manage there, plus Tower Hill, plus a whole lot of other inland reserves that have perhaps not so much recreational values like Tower Hill, but certainly ecological values that we need to keep managing. Quite a small operating budget as well, so definitely contemporary park management is a challenging place to work. A very interesting place, but can be quite challenging, and that's why I've worked with Bill and Pete quite a lot over the years, and you look at even the picnic tables that are here. The Southwest TAFE Building Studies group built these for us out of recycled materials, so we often find other ways of achieving things as well. So we work and we continue that place of education here, and involve lots of different parts of the community.